Hello everyone and welcome to another painting tutorial. In today's video I show you how to paint and draw a portrait with only 3 color pencils and a limited watercolor palette. And as always, all the materials that I used to create this study are listed down in the video description. Not everyone has all the color pencils, and many color pencils are pretty expensive, especially if they are highly pigmented or are just of a high quality. So obviously not everyone is able to afford them. And I received a lot of comments from you asking me how to create portraits if you have only a couple of color pencils, and some of you are complaining that they don't have all the colors, which is completely understandable. So I thought I make this video and show you how to paint a portrait if you have only a limited amount of color pencils, and that it doesn't matter if you don't even have realistic colors or colors that resembles the colors of your reference photo. And in this video we are going to paint from this reference photo I found on Pixabay, and I'm going to use 3 colors that have nothing to do with the colors on the reference photo. I'm going to use light magenta, cobalt green and ultramarine blue from Polychromos. And I'm also going to use the Pastel Dreams watercolor palette from Prima, but it doesn't really matter what color pencils or what watercolor palette you use. The point of the video is that you don't need the right colors to create a portrait. You can use any combination of color pencils, just make sure that you also have a color that is darker than the other ones. So if you have 3 pastel colors, it will be a little bit difficult to get the result. For this portrait I decided to draw directly on the watercolor paper because I felt like drawing. Those of you who are watching my videos for a longer time and know my process know that many times I use tracing paper to transfer my sketch onto the watercolor paper or to transfer the reference photo onto the watercolor paper, and you can do that as well. Here I just preferred drawing. I started with the Cobalt Green color pencil. For me it looks like turquoise actually, but it's called Cobalt Green. And I started with drawing in the eyes and the nose, and I make sure to place the drawing in the center of the paper, and I also make sure to not apply too much pressure in the beginning because I am trying to render the proportions and the likeness of the model according to the reference photo, and I can't really erase the color pencils that good. So I apply as less pressure as possible, and then when I make mistakes or I want to make any corrections, I can just carefully redraw or just place darker lines over the lighter lines. I like to simplify each element of the drawing. For example, for eyes I only start with 2 round lines, and for the nose I try to work in very straight shapes and lines. Oftentimes I use triangular shapes to draw to simplify the elements of the nose, a nostril or a nose ring. It's so much easier to work in those straight lines without drawing any curves than trying to render each detail and each shape correctly in the beginning. This made a huge impact on my drawings because I can now focus even more on the proportions of the drawing, and I don't get distracted by the details of each facial feature or generally of the elements of my drawing. What I mean by that is that, for example, if you paint the lips, it's not that important to get the exact shape of the lip correctly in the beginning of the sketching phase. It's more important to have the size, the placement and the rough shape of the lip right. Later on you can make the shape perfect and add all the little details. So basically it is from less detail to more detail, and I achieve this by simplifying what I draw. It is also helpful to draw with your whole arm and move the arm over the paper, then just move your hand and the wrist. This way you get straighter and cleaner lines and you are more dynamic, and for me it is overall easier to draw like that. Another tip for drawing portraits is to treat each element of the face as an individual shape or object. For example, the shadow that you can see in the left side of the face, I treat it with the same importance as I would treat the other elements of the face. So I check the distances between the shadow and the nose and the lips and the eyes, and this helps me to determine the likeness and the proportions of the face. And then after having set the rough shape of the shadow, I continue with the next point in the drawing, which is the jawline and the hair, for example. So each element and each detail of the composition gives me reference points for the proportions of the drawing. I can draw mental lines between the lips and the shadow, the nose and the lips, and compare the distances and the gaps between those elements so that in the end I have a rough idea of the proportions, and then I can, whenever I see that there's a mistake or some distance is too long or too short, I can correct it and I can compare this element with other points in the drawing. After having finished a rough preliminary sketch, I continued with using the remaining color pencils to refine the drawing a little bit and just transition to the rendering and the coloring process of the portrait. I didn't have any expectations in the beginning of the drawing because I think I never really created a portrait with only 3 colors, so my plan was to just change the colors as I felt they would fit to the color values and generally to the theme to the portrait. So I have one lighter color, this is the light magenta, and a medium dark color, which is the cobalt green, and the blue, which is the darkest one of these colors. So naturally I started with the lighter color and filled in all the darker areas first. The importance when you only have a limited color palette is to concentrate on the color values of the portrait. So the goal is to not render the exact colors of the portrait, but instead we focus on how dark and how light areas of the portrait are. Here in this case I skipped the majority of the midtones and I only concentrated on the darkest and on the most contrasted features of the portrait, like the eyes, the nose, the lips and the shadow on the left side of the face. I alternated the 3 colors whenever I filled in midtones and darker areas of the painting. For example, the darkest parts of the portrait are the eyes, so here I alternated between the light magenta and the cobalt green, and then after I couldn't get any darker with those colors, I continued with blue. I could still get much darker with the blue because I didn't apply all the pressure in the beginning, so I slowly built up those color values before I began the watercolor process, so that in the end I can still get darker. It is important that you don't apply too much pressure and are too dark in the beginning of the portrait if you don't exactly know the proportions and you don't know how dark you want to get. Since I didn't trace the reference photo, I still had to pay attention to the likeness and the proportions, so I was very careful with applying pressure. And the more I added details to the eye section, for example, the more certain I got and the more I could refine it and also apply more pressure. After having done roughly half of the work, I decided to switch to watercolors because I knew that after adding a couple of layers of watercolors, I would have to work on the color values again, so I didn't want to spend too much time so that it doesn't take forever to finish this portrait. I chose the Pastel Dreams palette for this portrait because the colors fit so perfect to the 3 color pencils, but as always, any other watercolor palette is perfectly fine for this. I just made a couple of color swatches on a separate sheet of paper to just check which colors would fit to the portrait. Then I added a light layer of a pink and a peach tone on the face and some of the lighter blue tones for the hair, and while everything was wet I also added greens and purples so that I get some pretty abstract effects in the hair and just to make it look a little bit more painterly. Then I also added some dripping effects because I really like that, and I also added my signature splashes because this is a great way to add an effect to the drawing without doing much. And you never know how the outcome looks, it's always a surprise. Then I let everything dry and I added a couple of individual hair strands on top of the abstract effects to frame the face a little bit in the center and to also just give the portrait a little bit more dynamic and maybe direction so that it doesn't look too wobbly. Next, I worked on the color values of the portrait portion again, and this time I took the darkest color pencils, here in this case Ultramarine Blue, and first of all I worked on the contours of the face so that it can pop out from the abstract areas. So I added a couple of strokes around the face to indicate more hair strands, and I also worked on the color values of the eyes again and make them darker, as well as the eyebrows, the nostrils and the mouth. This way I just enhanced the contrast of the portrait, and this way I can bring everything together as well. Then in the end I used a white gel pen to add a highlight on the eyes and the lips, but this is totally optional. You don't have to do that, you can just use the 3 color pencils. And this is how I created this painting. If this video tutorial was too fast for you, watch my original 1 hour and 20 minutes long painting lesson on my Patreon page. You can just follow the link in the video description, which leads you directly to this tutorial. In the original tutorial, I walk you through the complete process from start to finish, and I explain every little detail of the drawing and what I do. You get to download the original high-resolution file of the final artwork, the sketch that I did in the beginning of the video, the reference photo, and you can also see the material list. And in addition, you get access to almost 100 painting videos and lessons that I offer to my Patreons. If you want to see this video tutorial, just follow the link in the video description or check my website where I have a complete list of all my tutorials available. You can just click on them and they lead you to the Patreon tutorial. If you want to learn more, I have lots of tutorials and real-time lessons available for you on my Patreon site, in which I teach you my technique in detail and step by step. In many of my videos you even get to see my mixing process in a second camera window, and you can download the reference photo too. And for only $10 you get access to another whole library of underrated but even longer real-time videos of all my recent artworks. If you have seen some of my works and you always wondered how I did them, then this pledge is the right one for you. Just visit my website and browse the tutorial section. There you will find a list of all lessons and real-time videos available. And for the extra portion of art, you might even fancy the art surprise tier. For only $5 more, I send you a beautiful set of 3 unique art gifts each month. I chose the best artworks and illustrations that I created and turned them into beautiful magnets, stickers and postcards, which are not only wonderful decorations for your home, but also are rare collectibles, because once I send them out, they won't be available anywhere else and I don't reprint them. So get your art surprises package this month. I hope you enjoyed this video and found it helpful. If you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, leave a comment and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. See you in the next one. Bye bye!